Hello, we are Group 6, and this is a presentation for ComStrat 476. We're going to be discussing the importance of wearing a mask. My name is Matthew.
I'm Morgan.
I'm Jenna.
And I'm Lucia.
So for this assignment, we each observed 8 individuals crossing a busy intersection in the towns that we live in. We are going to go over the data that we observed during this assignment, and then we will present our campaign message. So I will start off with discussing the 8 individuals that I observed. I chose the busiest intersection of Federal Way, which is the city that I currently live in. The intersection is located at 320th Avenue and Pacific Highway. So some of my observations were that the majority of individuals were wearing masks. 5 out of the 8 individuals were wearing a mask properly, for a total of 63%. Only 3 individuals were not wearing a mask, and out of everybody that I observed, everybody obeyed the traffic laws while crossing the street, so there wasn't any risky behavior there. The ages ranged from an estimated mid-20s all the way up to the early 50s. And as far as the breakdown, we had 63% of the individuals that were white, 25% were Asian, and 13% of the individuals were Black. The majority of the individuals were male at 63%, and the female population was 38%. All 3 of the individuals that were not wearing a mask were white males. And then some side notes that I observed, there were 2 individuals that were walking dogs, and 3 individuals appeared to be homeless. Only one of those 3 did not have a mask. All of the people I observed, they didn't put themselves in danger, and they all waited appropriately to cross the street, and there wasn't any large groups of people. They all were crossing at individual times. So that's a breakdown of the people that I observed. We'll now have Jenna discuss her observations for the intersection that she observed.
Okay, well, I observed a intersection in downtown Colfax, Washington, which, being from a small rural community, I had a hypothesis that I would observe few people wearing a face mask. However, after my observations, it was noted that the ratio was split 50-50, with individuals wearing face masks. Those that were wearing face masks tend to look carefully as they crossed the street and were very orderly in the way that they did things. Those that were observed as not wearing a mask were more lively and not as careful when observing the rules of the road. However, every person observed and waited until they could cross the road safely, whether or not they were wearing a mask. Those that were wearing a mask tended to be wearing business casual wear, while those without masks were in casual outfits, suggesting that they may be out for fun instead of just for a quick lunch after work. Everyone I observed was 100% white, and their ages ranged from between their 20s and 50s. And Morgan, what did you observe?
Well, my original hypothesis before observing 8 individuals was that they would be more inclined to follow the mask mandate and exercise safe street crossing behavior. However, as the observations took place, I noticed that more individuals were inclined to follow the rules of safe street crossing rather than the importance of wearing a mask. Therefore, 63% of my sample was wearing a mask out of the 8 individuals, and 75% used caution of the street crossing safety. But in my opinion, people are more conscious about the dangers of the road safety rather than safety measures of dealing with COVID. And I think a lot of people in my community could build more from wearing a mask properly. And therefore, Lucia will be now taking over to observe her observations.
The location that I chose was a busy street in Bogota, Colombia. After observing my sample size, I proved my hypothesis was correct. There was a greater number of individuals who were not following the safe street crossing guidelines than individuals who were using their masks correctly. My research was made in Bogota, Colombia, and because there is still a big percent of people who haven't gotten the COVID vaccine, following the face mask mandate has been a very strict social conduct among people. I observed how people were more concerned about an individual not wearing the mask above the nose than an individual crossing the street while the light was green. I also observed the power of mirroring, how a person tends to imitate the gesture, attitude, or behavior of another. 99% of my sample size was wearing the mask, but 29% of the sample size was wearing the mask below the nose. My conclusion based on my research is that people in my demographic area are more concerned about COVID safeness than the street crossing risks, and in my opinion, it has a lot to do with the strong pressure there is between individuals regarding the social conducts implemented to them in certain demographic areas. Now, Morgan.
The behavioral influence between the mask and the public individuals' behaviors are crossing the street can connect to the influence of wearing a mask in public. While individuals' behavior identifies how they act or feel, there can be persuasion present by others who wear a mask or cross the street properly. During the data overview process, most of the individuals were wearing a face covering. However, there was an influence on how others cross the street appropriately. Individuals are more inclined to cross the street unsafely when others surrounded by them are also uncrossing safely, which shows how people can influence others to wear a mask if more people are around them. And then leading in, we will be talking about the demographics. And then so Jenna will take you over that. Okay.
Okay. For demographics for the age of reflecting the willingness to wear a mask, I observed that I believe the age can reflect the willingness or urgency of wearing a mask. The older adults that I observed tended to be wearing masks while the younger generation didn't. It's probably because they believed that they have less to worry about as their immune systems are younger and potentially stronger than those that are of the older generation. And Matthew will talk about the psychographics.
For the psychographics, we wanted to see if we asked the question, does a sense of urgency make people not want to wear a mask? A sense of urgency can incline people not to put on a face mask properly. Being in a rush makes individuals more inclined to be forgetful or to be mindful of their surroundings. When individuals seemed more relaxed during the observations, they were more likely to have their face covering appropriately placed and aware of the road safety guidelines. However, when people seemed more in a rush, they had risky behaviors when crossing the street, leading them to not wear their mask correctly because of a sense of urgency. So we're now going to pass it over to Lucia, who will discuss the geographic segments of our observations.
Okay, so the question we asked is, do the observed areas have the same percentage of mask wearers? So the analysis drawn from the results show that the geographic areas that are closer to each other have a more similar mask wear behavior from further geographic areas. This can be seen with Federal Way and the city of Yelm due that they're the closest to each other and are also the two geographic areas with the most similar mask wear behavior with 63% and 66% of mask wearers. Colfax City comes next in distance, and it's also the city that comes next in terms of similar mask wearers percentage, with 50% of individuals wearing the mask. The last geographic area observed is the furthest, Bogota, Colombia, and has a much more different percentage than the others, with 90% of mask wearers. I believe that the protocols imposed by each geographic area strongly affect the mask wear percentage. In Colombia, where I live, it is seen as a mandatory behavior to use the face mask in public, and also there is a strong social context surrounding that behavior. People feel they're being watched in a negative way when they're not using the face mask. There are individuals that can be seen not wearing the mask properly. I believe that those individuals feel they're obeying the mask mandate by just having it on, and that by just having it on, they are able to skip the social tension that not wearing the mask would create. Now Matt is gonna talk about the conclusions. The conclusion.
Thank you, Lucia. So after all of our observations, there was a recurring theme. I do think we had the unique perspective of having somebody from another country where the results were flip-flop from what we observed here in the United States, and that was that people were more willing to obey the street laws and the traffic laws. They were being risk averse as far as that goes. And I think with our observations, we came across the segment that we identified and honed in on that segment of our observations, and that is we want people to take the same safety precautions that they would when approaching a busy intersection. So we came up with a theme and a topic, and I will let Jenna discuss our graphic that we created, and I will talk about the social media campaign that we made in addition to the graphic. So here is Jenna to describe the flyer that she made.
So the tagline that we came up with for our campaign was, "You wouldn't let your loved one wander into traffic, so why let them wander into COVID?" We decided that this theme was the recurring theme that we observed because everyone that was observing the crosswalk rules should be observing the mask rules, and that they both keep you safe. And here is one of the social media posts that Matthew created.
We have that flyer that we'd like to have posted around community areas, common areas, stuff that could be given and distributed easily. And then to go along with that, we decided we would put that flyer out through Instagram as well as Facebook, through sponsored posts and promotions. So with the Instagram post here, we put the flyer, and then we also had our call to action, which was to visit the COVID-19 website hosted by the CDC so they can get more information on staying safe and healthy. We also created a mock Facebook post. For the Facebook post, it is a sponsored post. We felt that that was important because it will allow us to get more insight into the campaign so we can really track the target demographic and those target key segments that we're looking for with this campaign. For the messaging, we just kept it consistent with what the flyer says. We wanted to stress that, you know, the pandemic isn't quite over yet, and that it's up to everybody to keep ourselves and our loved ones safe. And our call to action, again, we're being consistent, is to visit the CDC website to get more information about COVID-19 and how to stay safe and healthy. And some tips for everyone and their loved ones to stay safe. So that is our presentation of our social media posts and our flyer for the campaign. That is our presentation, and we hope that that message resonates with you all. And remember that you wouldn't let your loved ones wander into traffic, so why let them wander into COVID? And we're here to say, remember to mask up.